Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring you another faction-focused video on the Necrons. And today we are going to talk about what is potentially one of the worst data sheets in all of Warhammer 40K, and that is the Convergence of Dominion. Now, this is not a massive mental mindbreaker video where I'm going to tell you how Convergence of Dominion can win a tournament near you. No, that is not this at all. But in a quest to put all the units on the channel in at least one game, and to talk about and review all the data sheets before the codex hits, so we can see all the changes that we've had, Convergence of the Dominion is on the list for the channel. All right, guys, welcome back. If you haven't subscribed already, please turn on the bell for notifications to get notified on all the content we bring you here on the channel, including some really interesting battle reports. So this week, me and Lane and myself, are going to be doing a battle of Deathwatch versus Grey Knights as a test and practice game for Lane's competitive list in the direction he wants to take his Deathwatch and Marines on the tournament scene. That battle is going to be interesting just to hear some of the basis of like why we're doing this, what we're hoping to achieve, what Lane's army can do theoretically, what my army can do to stop that and to potentially hard counter certain components of his army. So this is a game testing out for Lane and his list and what he's trying to run. So I'm going to be running the Grey Knights. I run a very strong infantry build with a lot of 2-up saves, and that's what we're looking for. Also, for Halloween, we are going to be doing Skeletons versus Zombies, a second round running of this, where I will be keeping a reanimation counter on how much I reanimate. And I have the list. I almost have last pieces of what I'm putting in there. It's gonna be hilarious, if nothing else. I am going to push to beat my last reanimation count record, which I believe was 121. I think. I'll have to double check. I'll definitely find out here for that video, because I was just thinking about it now, and I think it was 121. But I got to go back and double check that. Needless to say, all that stuff to come. Right now, we're here to talk about the Convergence of Dominion, what it can do, what it can't do, and why GWY. And I'm going to give my 2 cents on the answer to that question. Now, Magic the Gathering is a game that has publicly come out and stated that they do produce trash rares. There is going to be one in every set. And we know that. Now, granted, that's a collectible card game. There's a random aspect to it that we don't have in 40K. But I think it's kind of the same thing, is that sometimes there are units that GW realistically has absolutely no idea what to do with within the confines of their games. And we just get rules that may just not really work and not be any good, to the sense of rules that just not only on a unit, that's a lot of this stuff is just not that good, but then let's increase its price to 255 points. And that's the biggest takeaway from this entire thing. When looking over the Convergence of Dominion, I can see some interesting things that could be done with it. But at 255 points, that is way too much to even just throw it on the table in a friendlier setup to go, hey, look at my cool looking Convergence of Dominion and all their prettiness. Because honestly, there's something really appealing about that model. I really liked it. As soon as I saw it released, I went out and bought them, not even caring if they worked or what they did. I'm just like, this is such a cool looking model for some reason. It's just a rock in 3 separate forms. If you haven't noticed, it's what it looks like when it lands, as it breaks apart, and then basically fully broken apart, and what it is, which is kind of cool. And with that being said, when you get this unit for 255, you get 3 of the Starsly. Sorry if I butcher that. That's always what I've called them. 3 of the Starsly. So for 255, you're getting 3 vehicle units. Okay, that's reasonable in points for that concept if it was a vehicle unit that could do more than it can do, or be positioned in more than it can. All, especially with what we saw from 9th edition. I can't say that's the big why, because this unit was one of the most interesting units in 9th edition. Major, causing so much controversy. One, with fortification deployment, because you can't deploy a fortification within 3 inches of a piece of terrain. But when you're picking this up and putting it back down, well, you're placing it so it's technically being deployed. But this specifically in this rule says you just have to be 9 inches away. So it contradicted itself. I mean, it would have been a real easy fix for GW just come out and FAQ it and say, hey, this means this and this does this or not. Sadly, that didn't happen. However, it did still have the unique ability to pick up and move. Any of your technomancers that were within, I believe, 6 inches of it, might have been 3, could complete an action. And it would complete at the end of your turn. And at that point, or reinforcement step, either way, you pick the Star Sleeve up and it comes off the table. Then, during your next reinforcement step, you drop it back down 9 inches away. These guys could be used for behind enemy lines, engage on all fronts. They couldn't take objective markers, but who cared? You had flying buildings. You could move block in certain terrain areas, again, depending on if you could or could not land within 3 of terrain. This was a very interesting and cheap unit for these guys. I liked them. They were interesting. Were they competitive? That's on you. I know some people that were running them. Again, it mattered on the ruling of you if you could or could not land within 3 inches of terrain. And I don't want to start a big debate with that in the comments section. We're in 10th edition, so it doesn't matter. But I've seen it ruled both ways competitively. I personally didn't want to run into that issue, so mine stayed on the shelf. But it was always in my mind to be able to utilize the engage on all fronts behind enemy line aspect, as well as some of our personal secondaries, such as Purge the Vermin and things like that, to be able to wall the enemy out. They could also complete actions. So technically you could use them for ancient machineries, I believe, or some of the other actions that just required a unit, because that was the key point of them. They were a unit. Now, that was the 9th edition form. Interesting unit. A flying building. Really cool. Haven't seen that since the times of Shifting Worldscape. So what do we get now? Well, let's start off with their stat line. So, no movement characteristic, as expected of a building. Toughness 11, 2-up save, 10 wounds, leadership 7, with objective control value of 0. Now, it's really important that I move over to one of the abilities right now, because in aspect of talking about these things, we have to talk about this one specific ability in order for this to make sense. So because of the deployment of these, and because there's 3 of them, when this unit is set up the first time on the battlefield, its models do not have to be set up in unit coherency. Instead, each model must be set up wholly within 12 inches of one other model from its unit. From that point on, each model in the unit is treated as separate. So you don't have to put them within 3 inches of each other. 2 inches of each other. Instead, they have to be set up wholly within 12 inches of one other model. So this gives us some spacing with how we deploy them. And that's going to also continue to help us down the angle of what we can possibly even do with this thing. It is a vehicle, and it is a fortification. There's nothing in the book that says a fortification cannot do some of the actions to score secondaries, as well as the fact there's nothing that stops a vehicle from doing those. So that's going to be a critical point for what we can get out of this thing for 255 points. That's the first part. Also, it is technically an eligible scoring unit, which means, we don't see that verbiage a lot, but this means that it counts towards things like engage on all fronts, and that's going to be also important for what we can do with this thing at all. All right, so its stat line, its toughness, everything like that, it's tough. I mean, a T11, 10 wounds, most guns in the game, even are like I see the D6 plus 3, we see D6 plus 1, unless you're getting in Melta range. You're not passing 10 wounds on a single shot. And then even when you get in Melta range, a lot of those units that do pass that realm, they're coming in units. So you may be getting more than one of those Melta weapons coming in against this thing just to make sure it's dead. Now, also at that same time, if your opponent is able to bring strong Melta from a unit, such as Eradicators, all the way up to your Convergence of Dominion, and shoot your Convergence of Dominion, I'm going to tell you right now, one of two things is happening. Number one, you are losing that game horribly. And you probably don't care that your Convergence of Dominion just got hit by 6 Melta guns, maybe 3, but 6. At that point, you don't care. At that point, you're just like, hey, can we call it? Are we good? Are we good? The other point of it is your opponent has made a horrible, horrible mistake, in which case, whatever else is in your army is not being shot at by 6 Melta weapons. And chances are that target is probably more valuable than the Convergence of the Minion. So, one thing these guys do have, oogie boogie spooky factor that nobody knows what they do. And that is a very real thing. I never, ever want to base anything off a gotcha moment. But I don't feel like this is a gotcha moment. You can explain it to your opponent. Your opponent's going to look at it. Your opponent's going to think the exact same thing that all of us are when we read this data sheet. What? And they're going to look at it, and you're looking at it, and we're all looking at this thing going, what can I do with this? Like, it's cool. I want to run it. What do I do with it? And your opponent's going to go, what does he think he's doing with this thing? And they're going to be waiting for the gotcha moment that's never going to occur. So they might just go after this thing and try to kill it just because they don't want to find out what it does. If that's the case, that's pretty decent value for 255 points, especially considering there is 3 of them and they'd only be taking out 1, maybe 2. All right, so over into this thing's gun, because the gun is also silly fun. Transdimensional Abductor, 18-inch range, 3 attacks, ballistic skill 4, strength 6, AP 2, 3 damage. Now back into the fact this thing's a vehicle. I'm going to talk about that for 2 reasons now. One, it is a unit that therefore could get the buff from the Sovereign. So technically it could get +1 to hit and hit on 3s. Also, because it is a vehicle, it can get a feel no pain off your Canoptic Spiders. All right, here we go. So when you have your Silent King nearby, you can re-roll 1s to hit and to wound with your 18-inch range gun. Got it. All right, back over into reality of it. This thing is actually a hilarious weapon. Chances are you might have the Sovereign nearby. Early game, the Sovereign might be nearby. So there is a chance at maybe getting the hitting on 3s, but that's not even it. The point of it is that this is AP 2 with 3 damage. Strength 4 is not that great. AP 2 with 3 damage is hilarious because now you're looking at the possibility of accidentally hitting, wounding, and killing a Terminator. And once again, leaving your opponent at the point of, I just lost a Terminator to this thing. Why does that have 3 damage? Why does that have 3 damage? And epic foreshadowing, I guarantee during the game, when I use these against Lane, he's going to say the exact same thing of, why does that do 3 damage? What is with that profile? Because it is definitely one of the most Scrabble, Boggle-styled profiles of weapons. Like they just rolled a D6. This is a D&D weapon because they rolled the damage chart beforehand and they got a bad strength and a great AP and a great damage. And they left the strength. All right, so abilities. Everything's got an ability. So what does this thing have? Unfortunately, we lost the coolest ability, which was the chance to pick them up and teleport them somewhere else. I don't know why we lost that. That's really disappointing because it was super unique. And if it still had that, for what these abilities can do at 255 points, it would be very interesting. Plus, again, the engage on all fronts, behind enemy lines, secondaries that you complete, this thing not being able to move takes 255 points, almost feels like what it originally was when it could move, and then someone just decided right before they released it to go, you know, that's a building, it's not allowed to move, delete. And that's why we got this. That's my opinion. Someone just was really mad at buildings. They got beat up really bad in playtesting. They're like, you know what? I got the last say on this. Delete. You don't move no more. Got it. Okay, so what do we have? Well, we buff reanimation. So first of all, as always, being a Necron unit has reanimation protocol. And then it has the reanimation nodes. While a friendly Necron unit is within 6 inches of this fortification, each time that unit reanimation protocol is active, you can re-roll the dice, roll to determine how many wounds are reanimated. It also has ancient cover, which is just says it provides cover where other units wouldn't. This does count as a piece of terrain. So if a model is concealed behind one of these, it can gain the benefit of cover, which, okay, that's kind of neat. They're not the biggest models, but they cover enough space to be able to give a few things cover. It is a fortification, which means that units can be selected as the target of ranged attacks, but each time such attack is made, unless it is made with a pistol, subtract 1 from the hit roll, as well as models in this unit do not need to take desperate breakout tests for falling back while battle shocked, except for those that move through one enemy model when doing so. In other words, this thing really isn't in combat when it's in combat. It doesn't have a combat profile. It can't fight back. But at that same time, too, infantry, other vehicles and stuff like that, if they're in combat with it, they can be shot at. They can fall back without desperate breakout tech, but they would still be falling back. So they wouldn't be able to shoot. Granted, because this thing doesn't move, doesn't charge, and since it doesn't charge, it doesn't have to get into combat. And since it doesn't have to get into combat, why is your opponent going to put it in combat with anything? I'm going to charge your Convergence of Dominion. They're a little Starsly. I'm going to charge it with 10 gargoyles. Okay, the gargoyles will never do any damage to it. Maybe a wound on accident. Then they fall back, so then they don't get to shoot. And I get to shoot at them because you're in base with a fortification. I really don't see the benefit of it. But if you're charging in with something that has, like, you know, hammer, fist, something that can punch off, and you're like, you know, I'm going to use that to get a little bit extra move and charge into that thing. Okay, sure. But you're not going to charge units into it and expect to fall back with them. I don't think you would. Maybe there's a tactical play into it, again, to get that extra move, but I doubt it. But hey, there it is. It covers it. So if you fall back, you're not allowed, I mean, unless you can fall back, shoot, and charge. Hey, we give that. Listen, I'm pulling here right now for it. I'm pulling. But I do say the best for last. I do say the best for last for the way that these guys can actually, what we can do with them on the table and how they can function. Because there is 2 secondaries that we can kind of play off of with some stuff here and what we can do with these guys. You have 3 models that you are deploying. And those 3 models have to be within 12 inches of one other model. So there are some maps and some deployments and setups where you can place one of the Starsly close enough so it is within 9 of the table quarter, of 9 of the table corner specifically. Then you measure 12 inches off of it from the back side of it. Turn it flat, so there's a little less room going out from the 9. And now you measure out 12 from the back of it. From there, you place the Starsly at its point because it has to be wholly within 12. And then the next one does the same thing going flat. Now, on a hammer and anvil deployment, this means you should be able to get the Starsly in engage range on the corners, by the corner, and have one in position to complete the secondary for deployed teleport homers, I want to say. I always mix that one up in the scramblers, but the one for 9 inches in the corner. Hey, it's a thing. It's a thing we can do. Now, in doing so, you are dedicating that one in that corner to its 6-inch aura in your backfield for re-rolling your reanimation dice. The other ones are also going to have to be across that back edge. This means these guys are not going to be in play for the entire game, if that's a route you want to go. Personally, what I like and am considering is playing them more up front, using one in the middle of my deployment zone, in the center line, to be the pivot point for the other two to be my guaranteed engage on all fronts for backfield stuff. I'm playing on the fact that my opponent will not actually want to kill them because they won't care about them. And they will help to give me reroll reanimations on my warriors. Now, kind of giving a sneak into what my Halloween list is going to be. I'm focusing very, very heavy on reanimation. And these guys, that's what they do. Unfortunately, I really wish these guys would have had the ability to teleport across the table. If that was the case, the 6-inch buff would be actually very usable. The 6-inch buff is not terrible. Okay, so when we break this down for what we're getting for 255 points, we're getting 3 vehicles. We're getting 3 vehicles that are toughness 11 with 10 wounds. They cannot move, but they are units. They are able to give us a reroll on a reanimation. Inherently, with the D3 models, is not grandiose, but we're all taking a reanimator. So now we're re-rolling both of those D3. So we're almost guaranteeing ourselves a 2, at least a 2. You know, I very, very rarely will I ever re-roll a 2 for the risk of getting a 1. So basically, we're just re-rolling 1s and 2s to get 2 wounds back, maybe 3. But when we look at the warriors, warriors are able to do D6. D6 plus the D3. And when you roll a 1 or a 2 on the D6, that ends that can end a warrior run. When you're looking at it and you have your warriors and they got beat up and they're down to like 7 guys and you're like, all right, cool, goes into my turn. First, we're going to roll, and you have a res orb in there. So first you roll for your D6 and you roll a 1. Like, okay, well, I guess I'll roll my D3 and you roll a 1. Now you got 2 models back. Your warrior squad's sitting as a 9-man. And yes, you have a resurrection orb, but you are now very, very uncomfortable because that squad is under 50%. And that is really risk for those guys to be gone. With the convergence, we can re-roll that dice and keep those warriors alive longer. If we could teleport this thing, that would be really cool. I would totally be more excited about trying this thing out for 255 points. But for 255 points, I don't want to spend it on this unit that cannot move. If you reduce the points, okay, now it's a building that we deploy out there. We can put it wherever we want in that same sense. I mean, you could literally build a wall and clog an entire area up with these guys. There's no 3-inch fortification rule anymore. So you literally could take a piece of plastic, put all 3 of them there, and create a wall that your opponent is forced to go through that you can move up behind, shoot from, and gain cover. And just wall and just stop your opponent with whatever they may have that can't move through runes, that isn't infantry, and that doesn't possess the ability to just crush these things and move them out of their way. Or, again, draw random fire. So there is a lot of really cool, kind of cute things that we could do with them. But 255 points is steep. That's a lot. That's a quarter of a 2. That's getting close to, that's an 1/8 of a competitive army. And then you talk about what the warriors cost for a 20-man, and then the lords, and then the characters, and everything else. And you start running out of points. When me and Lane were tech designing our list for our Halloween episode, realized into it where Lane's able to actually do quite a bit extra. Whereas when I'm investing so much into reanimation, there's no room for anything else, which I'm fine with. I like the fact that we have this is going to be a strong reanimation build, that we can go this heavy with it and you have the tools to do it. but the Convergence cannot move. And that was the most unique thing about it in 9th edition. So one of two things need to happen. Either the Convergence needs to be able to move again, or reduce its points. Now, the scary part is we are looking at a reduction of 3 data sheets. And I have heard people say this, and I could see it, and I would give an argument for the Convergence getting removed as a data sheet in the Necron army. And what it would become is a piece of their terrain and a terrain piece of their set and army. I would be disappointed because the Convergence is a really cool looking model. I think it was a great concept and a great idea and very unique unit, and it just got nerfed into the ground. So hopefully that isn't the case. Hopefully GW kind of retcons this and gives us moving vehicles in some way, shape, or form. Now, obviously, how it would change into this, I mean, we have units that pick up at the end of our opponent's movement phase and can deep strike back down. If you're too worried about them bouncing all over the place, you don't want someone picking all 3 up in a turn, make it 1 per army or per unit can do it, or make it once per game for them. I mean, Ophidian's Calidus Assassin, amongst other units, can do it. The entire Grey Knight army can do it all game long. So why not let these things just pick up and do that? Is giving a 6-inch reroll of Reanimation more on the front lines really that game breaking? I know that Reanimation itself is a very, very, very strong ability for Necrons in general, but is that brutal that we can't move this? You know, is being able to score secondaries with a building too much? Granted, they're 11 wounds, or toughness 11 with 10 wounds. So it's not even like it's that difficult of a threat for most armies to take down. And it's still, I mean, a 2-up save, that's pretty tough. But is it that complex? I don't know. I wasn't involved in the playtesting, you know, so I can't really say. Maybe someone just, maybe someone just hates the fortification. Realistically, I still like my idea of just somebody got beat up badly by them, went into the room and said, you know what, delete, you're not moving anymore. And that was it. That's my lore of it, is a Games Workshop playtester got beat up so bad by Convergence of Dominion, they went in and hit the delete key and said, I don't know. I don't know where it went. It was there a minute ago. All right, guys. Well, hopefully I was able to keep this interesting. The Convergence Dominion is a real heartbreaker of a unit. I recorded this video originally yesterday to put out, and as I was listening to myself talk back about it, I felt like it was so dark and so dreary and not what we're here for. Not what you want to hear about the Convergence of Dominion, because we know that the Convergence is not going to be in any top tier competitive winning GT Nova Vegas Open list in the next couple months. Hey, maybe in the Codex it'll get fixed. Maybe it won't even be there. Only we'll see soon. So, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this. Convergence of Dominion. We'll be seeing it on the table soon. So we will get a game with this here very, very soon. It will be part of my Halloween list. I'm considering it my tombstones. This is my tombstones for my army. That's all I got. Guys, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.